Welcome to this week's Ask the Doctors on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. I'm Eric Marsh. Thank you for joining us for this hour-long question and answer conversation show with Jason that much taller than me. Thank you to Jason Troutwine for sitting in for me last week on this program. I appreciate the fact that he is willing to continue to help me out as needed in that way. We have our doctors with us, Dr. David Jetmore, Wayne County Health Officer, Dr. Thomas Huth, Vice President of Medical Affairs at Reed Health. I haven't been with you for a couple of weeks. These have been some very hard last few weeks in Wayne County as the names have continued to come out of people that we have lost and a number of people that we have sick. Let's take a little time and kind of catch up on where we are. And the conversation, I think, maybe, hopefully, begins to change at this point as we're waiting on word as to whether the United States will actually accept the Pfizer vaccine for the first one. I'm sure there'll be more than that. But Dr. Huth, let's start with you.
Well, it has been a momentous couple of weeks, Eric, because the numbers continue to mount, particularly in Indiana. Indiana is now the second or third highest growth rate of cases in the United States, and that's not a place that any of us want to be. And the way that the governor has described it to small groups, I was on a phone call the other day where he talked about it, and then to the media, is that Indiana's on fire. And so I think that kind of describes his state of mind about where we are. And so he has just implemented a new executive order directing hospitals to defer, where possible, truly elective procedures to after January the 4th to try to erect a little bit of a fire break in the, not in the transmission, but in the hospital capacity, because a lot of hospitals are severely overloaded, and something like 70%, I saw a statistic this morning, 70% of Indiana hospitals have fewer than like 5 open ICU beds because of COVID-19. And so, the situation is really not good. I think if you look at the Indiana statistics, you can see that maybe there's a little bit of a plateau look to the case curve in it, but it's very variable. Some days it's, it seems lower. Some days it seems very high. We've had 2 of our very highest days ever in the last couple of weeks. I think up around 8,500 new cases a day on those occasions. And, it's just not a comfortable place to be. And when we get to the statistics that I've brought, we can see that maybe there are some little bright spots in our local data, but I think we're still a little bit worried that the post-Thanksgiving surge that we've been concerned about could still materialize, particularly in terms of the more severe cases. But probably the big news that most people are focused on is that we're soon expecting FDA approval. Not approval, it's probably the wrong word for it, because that's a very specific term in their parlance. Approval means full approval, like a drug would be through the normal process that doesn't apply during a public health emergency. What they call it is authorization for the Pfizer vaccine, and shortly to be followed by the Moderna vaccine, probably. And the full FDA approval could happen today, tomorrow, Sunday, Monday. Nobody's really sure exactly when, and they're not saying exactly when, but they have been giving lots of hints that it's going to happen, and pretty soon. And in fact, the way I saw it described in a statement that they released was that their evaluation analysis committees of experts are very impressed with the performance and the safety of the Pfizer vaccine, and that they expect to approve it imminently.
It would be pretty hard for them not to approve it, since the UK has already started putting the shot in people's arms, and I think Canada has already said that they're accepting it also.
Yeah, I think they would say that, and I heard Dr. Fauci say that when the UK had approved it, that he thought they were being a little premature because they hadn't taken the time to analyze all the statistics, and some people are probably going, see, I told you so, when they had these 2 cases since their approval where people had anaphylactoid type reactions. I think we may see a slightly different nuance, a nuance in the FDA's emergency use authority based on the UK's experience with those two cases, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think the UK just accepted the data from Pfizer, and it wasn't separately vetted by an independent committee of scientists like we do here in the United States. It costs us time, but like you noted, it can weed out unexpected problems.
Right.
Dr. Jetmore, talk about what's happening in your world.
Well, I won't give you a bunch of numbers. I can say that things are very high. The level of cases are very high in the county, much higher than they were last spring. As Tom said, our hospitals filled almost to overflowing with COVID patients. We haven't, it may come yet, Tom, but we haven't seen that expected surge after Thanksgiving. And it may be that people listened to the advice we gave and didn't gather huge gatherings of people for that Thanksgiving meal. And if that's the case, they need to be congratulated. But we still may see some. We're not out of the hole yet as far as Thanksgiving, and then I think everybody dreads the onset of winter and the holidays of Christmas and New Year's Eve, which are traditional times for people to gather together. We continue to test at both of our sites here in Cambridge City, and I talked to Christine earlier this morning. She said on our rapid test yesterday, 46% of the tests were positive, of people just coming in with symptoms and asking for a rapid test. That's astounding, and that shows you how much the virus has infiltrated this population.
How's your staff?
Doing good. There really are. I've mentioned it before, there's a considerable kind of esprit de corps, a sense of mission and purpose, and so that's good. That's what helps to sustain people through tough times. And the community is stepping up. We just had another first responder parade, I think is how I heard it described this morning, that a lot of police, fire, ambulance crews circled the hospital for a few minutes with their lights going as a sign of respect and encouragement for the staff in the hospital. And those kinds of shows of support are really very helpful, and helps people to know that they're being thought of. And I think also it maybe is a reflection of a little bit more engagement on part of the community, that we all want to do the right thing here, and hopefully that means there's a significant portion of the community that is committed to helping us defeat this. I like to say that we have to all of us, whether we're working healthcare or we're, deliver the newspaper, it doesn't matter what we do, we have to take the attitude that, we are the conduit of the virus to other people, or can be, especially this sneaky little devil that likes to basically hide in high proportion of people who never get any symptoms at all. And so in order to protect other people, we have to protect ourselves. And that requires a lot of engagement in the community. And like I say, these shows of support on the part of school kids and churches and the first responders, I think is maybe a hopeful sign that a lot of people in the community are engaged.
Well, the engagement tends to go up when you find yourself on the national news. It's either for a really good thing or a really bad thing. And they were kind of camped out, MSNBC was kind of camped out at Reed Health, and everybody's going, well, I guess it's not going to be for a good thing.
That's true. I think we look at it as these partners with the media, including you, Eric, and your team, as really important part of the whole impact that we want to have on the community. We don't just take care of sick people, but we want to help people to do better, and part of that is understanding. And so the ability to inform and educate, however we can do that, that's what we'll do. And you're right, 2 weeks ago, I should say last week, middle of last week, there was an NBC reporter from Chicago with a film crew that came from Indianapolis to support him, who talked to a bunch of people and videoed a lot of places, and I spent quite a bit of time with them, and some of that ended up on air with MSNBC, and then on tiny little bit of it was on NBC's Meet the Press show on Sunday, this past Sunday, when Dr. Birx was interviewed there. And so that exposure, it's maybe feels like a little bit of a possible potential double-edged sword, because I don't want people to get the impression that we have a disaster area here, because we're managing things rather well. But we do want people to know that their behaviors are really what's can drive or can lessen the severity of what's going on. And so that was the message we're trying to make sure gets conveyed.
You're talking about people's behaviors. You were talking about, and I haven't had a chance to see it, so I'm just going to kind of turn it over to you, a study that was done about masks. Talk a little bit about what that came out.
Stephen and Ryan might be able to show the graphics that I brought for that, but it was a study just published yesterday in one of the American Medical Association journals. This happens to be the JAMA Internal Medicine article. And basically what they did here was they used a special technique to very finely mist a special saline solution, and they were able to kind of measure its penetration while somebody's wearing it. And I think this study was interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One is that it was done on somebody actually wearing a mask. So a lot of the mask studies that you see are like done with the mask being, in a special box, but not on a person. And I think what it can do is kind of show what are some other factors with the mask that may impact its effectiveness. The other thing was that they used this very finely misted saline solution with particles that were smaller than the typical virus particle. And they tested various homemade mask solutions, and that's what we're seeing on the screen right now. I've highlighted the three that performed best, and the upper left one on this gentleman is a black mask, but that's a 2-ply woven mask with tension ear loops, and it also, in the description, you can see that it has an aluminum nose bridge that you can form to kind of close that gap. And the important thing that they say in the article is that they think it performs well because it really closes up all the gaps around the mask. And that's probably a very important part of this. But that particular mask and the other two that I have highlighted, the Bandits bandana and the neck gaiter version, those three actually perform better than the standard medical procedure mask.
Wow.
Which we've never sort of heard that kind of information before. And so if you're looking for what are the best non-medical masks to get, there they are. Those are the three. The important thing is the closing up as much as possible the gaps around the face. Then the second graphic are versions of the standard medical mask. At the upper left, that's not highlighted, is the way that you typically see a medical procedure mask worn. And the way the gentleman has it on, you can see that on the sides it's gapped. That performed, in that configuration, performed less effectively than the other ones that I just showed you. But the three versions that performed really well were these three that I have highlighted. And this was the top one is the medical mask that actually is knotted on the side. The loops are knotted on the side, and the sides are tucked in. And of course, all these medical masks, by the way, have the formable nose bridge component to it. The one in the middle on the bottom actually has a sort of a series of 3 rubber bands that are applied to give more pressure around the sides to help close up the gaps. And then the one on the lower right is a very interesting one where over the standard medical mask is actually a little, probably about a 3 or 4 inch section of nylon hose that's applied over it. And in my mind, what it would resemble to me is a medical mask with like a neck gaiter over it would be a similar configuration. But these 3 that I have highlighted performed not quite, but pretty close to how effective a fitted N95 performs. Like about 80% effectiveness, and the fitted N95 is rated to perform at 95%. But these were the highest performing of all the typical configurations that you can find. So I just thought your viewers might find that interesting, and really there was an accompanying editorial that pointed out that, and this doesn't even take into account a couple of factors. One is this is just looking at this superfine mist penetration. When we know that the virus tends to ride on larger moisture droplets, which should be even more effectively filtered out by any of these configurations. In addition to that, this is the penetration onto an uninfected wearer, sort of a recipient. And so it doesn't even attempt to measure what would the entire system look like if you had an infected person, a disperser wearing a similar configuration, and how would that be received by an uninfected receiver. So it doesn't even attempt to get into any of that. So I think at the bottom line, what you conclude from this is there's just one more piece of evidence that masking does make a difference.
You're watching Ask the Doctors on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. Before we leave this, twice during that, you mentioned the nose bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about, both of you, how important that is in the proper wearing of the mask. I mean, if it's there, it's covering the mouth. I mean, I'm going to cough out of my mouth. I'm not going to cough out of my nose, right?
The thing
so
is,
how important is it that my nose is actually
joke
covered?
that every time I see somebody going around with a mask that's below the nose, I have this urge to say, look, if you can't cover both your mouth and your nose, then just cover the nose. Because you're breathing out of your nose more than you are talking. No, most people are. I mean, maybe there are exceptions to that. I don't know, but it's very important that both the mouth and the nose be covered. And I've always had the intuition that getting the sides, getting under the chin, the sides, and over the nose, as many of those gaps closed up as possible is very important. And this article made the point that the nose bridge forming was important.
One of the simple things that tells you how important that is, this is from years of being in surgery with glasses on. You put a mask on, and if you're someone that wears glasses, your glasses fog up.
Yeah.
Why do they fog up? Because breath is coming out from behind the mask. I would go to the point of actually putting a strip of tape across to seal that, to keep my glasses from fogging up. But that little aluminum tab in there is very important. When people have a surgical mask, press that down so it contours nicely with your nose.
This is Ask the Doctors. You can do that. Send a question on our Facebook page. You can also send a tweet to @WCTV Info. I think we've got some questions coming in. We'll get to some of those. We're supposed to have a guest. We were running into a few technical difficulties, so we'll see whether that comes up. If not, we'll move that guest to next week. But can we get the first question that we have for the doctors? If a school teacher tests positive, why wouldn't the students be considered close contact and be required to quarantine? He says as he looks at Dr. Jetmore.
Well, a contact by CDC definition is someone that you've been within 6 feet of for longer than 15 minutes. So it would be possible for the teacher to have a positive COVID test, and yet not all of the children, maybe none of the children would have to quarantine, or maybe 1 or 2. The same thing goes with a child that has a positive COVID test in the schools. You don't shut the whole school down. It basically comes down to that simple definition of a contact, which is more than 15 minutes and closer than 6 feet.
Okay. Next question. Let's see if we can get through a couple here real quick. I would like to know why you keep praising schools for being in session when they are running many buildings at half capacity. The every other day is very hard for some employers to work around parent schedules. Can schools resume full capacity in-person learning?
Well,
and there's probably a couple of things there that you want to get into.
There's several things going on there. One of the reasons I've praised the schools, and I'll continue to do so, is just the fact that they're soldiering on in the middle of this huge pandemic with a positivity rate of over 14%. We've got these dedicated educators educating these children. Now, we're not seeing any evidence of a lot of spreading within the school. We see children in school that have COVID, but we've traced this back, they've gotten the COVID outside the school doing something else, and then the children that are being taken out of the school are contacts mostly. They're not, the majority of them are people that have been in contact with another COVID student. So having said that, it's hard to run a school at total full capacity because of the simple limitations of a room. You can have a 300-seat auditorium, but filling that up may be 60 people if you maintain that social distancing for doing something. So I can hear the questioner's frustration with this situation, and I understand that. This is tough for everybody, parents, the children, and the employers. But having the school shut down, I think, would be even worse because we have, I think, learning from a computer for a young child is not nearly as efficient as learning in real time from a teacher who's physically there and who can help the student. Other problems, as I've said before, are a lot of these children depend on school lunches for nutrition. Their mothers depend on them going to school so they can go to work. Otherwise, they have to miss work in order to help the child with the computer. So, like Dr. Hughes said, we're going to have the start of vaccination. There's light at the end of the tunnel. It's a longer tunnel than we'd like to have, but nonetheless, we're going to get there. Just hang in.
Talk a little bit about that, if you would, for a few minutes, because for some people, to say there's a vaccine coming, you look at the news again, we mentioned the UK is already putting needles in arms. This is going to be, when I hear the numbers of doses that are available, my first thought is, okay, this is going to be a long, drawn-out process to get the millions of people vaccinated that need to be. Talk about what you anticipate this process looking like and how long this process could take to get done, even in Wayne County, which is not when you compare it to, major metropolitan areas, not a large area. But even if we're just trying to vaccinate the 70,000 people in Wayne County, what are you looking at for a time frame here?
Well, the state expects the early phases, which are going to be focused on healthcare workers and long-term care facility residents, and then other vulnerable members of the community is kind of the three big umbrella groupings of individuals. That is probably going to last at least through January into February, and at a minimum. And part of that is just because of the supply train is just only going to be able to keep up so much. And part of that is the fact that we do have to do 2 shots. That means every person's got to get it twice. And just the logistics of making that happen, and it has to be spread out over 3 or 4 weeks, depending which vaccine you get. You can see that there are just going to be physical limitations to how quickly you can throughput all of that. So I don't know, I guess you could run some calculations. We want to get, if we go with kind of the national numbers, they want to try to get 70% or so of the entire population vaccinated, and so in Wayne County that'd be what, 49 or 50,000 people. So how long would it take you to do 49 or 50,000 people with the capacity we have with people and other resources to get it done? It's going to be a while. So, but nevertheless, we're trying to figure out how to get it done and as expeditiously as possible. The state is expecting the hospitals to help the local health departments especially when we start getting into vaccinating people who are living in the community. And we're going to step up and do that, and we're going to put together some planning meetings with all the local health departments for the surrounding counties to figure out how can we collaborate to make this happen as efficiently as possible, because we want it to happen fast. But the other big limiter, Eric, is just people's willingness to take the vaccine. You kind of find people all over the map in terms of their willingness. Some people are just upfront saying, I'm not taking it. And you have people at the other end of the spectrum who are like, I can't get it fast enough. And so I count myself in that camp. I've been watching all this from the beginning, and to me, the safety data, effectiveness data are amazing. And so the sort of the risk to benefit ratio is very favorable for this, as far as I can tell. I will be first in line for it, intend to be. But then you have people in kind of gradations in the middle. You got some who say, well, I'll consider it, but I want to wait until later and see, what happens with other people. So I think and we really can't force people to do it. I mean, I think we have to be honest with people and say the emergency use authorization that the FDA will provide is not the same thing as full approval of other types of pharmaceutical products. It is just that, an emergency authorization that is effective for the period of the public health emergency, or until they rescind the authorization, or until the vaccine gets fully approved by the normal processes, whichever happens first. And technically, it remains an investigational agent. And for that reason, we don't force people to take investigational agents. And so for that reason, everybody has to make their own decision about whether and when they will do it. And we have to respect that. So I think when you add in all of the, the wheres and wherebys and what fors and maybes and contingencies, it's going to take a really long time to get enough people vaccinated to feel like we've got enough immunity in the community that we can say this is safely pretty much over.
I think as it progresses, it'll gain momentum. We'll become more skilled at doing it. People will learn where the vaccination sites are. And one of the things that I'm hopeful for is that this first wave, which will be given to healthcare workers and people in nursing homes, will have an outsized effect on bringing down the death rate, because here in Wayne County, 70% of our fatalities are from people in long-term care facilities. So getting those people vaccinated is going to be a fantastic thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're watching Ask the Doctors on WCTV, Channel 21, WGTV, Channel 11, streaming on Facebook Live. We're taking your questions on our Facebook page, also on our Twitter feed, at WCTV Info. Take a week off and can't speak. If there's another question, why don't we bring that one up? Why are local nursing facilities not current on dashboard as far as positive cases? That dashboard is causing some real issues.
We get a lot of dashboard complaints. Those fatalities at nursing homes and those infected cases are reported by the nursing home to our local Board of Health, and we report them to the state. But I think anytime you're reporting anything, there's always a lag period. I'm not sure specifically what the particular questioner is referring to, but I think we're doing the best we can to keep those numbers current, but they're all reported.
You can see on the state's website, it might be this may not be exactly the dashboard that we're talking about here, but you can see facilities in every county that, the number of cases that they have, the number of, whether it's a resident of the facility or staff. Now, is every facility populated in there? I think we have to realize that there can be a lot of reasons why there seem to be gaps. Not only do the facilities have to report the data, but the state has to do its processing. There has to be a certain amount of data validation. And I think they want to be sensitive. I would want to be sensitive to the possibility that we're not unfairly labeling someplace as having being disproportionately affected when maybe there's problems with the way the data has been gathered or analyzed. That processes validation, and all that happens behind the scenes at the state level. And and I'm not here to make excuses for why things don't appear to be on track. And we've been kind of asked this question before for at least a month. You would think that they'd get all this stuff worked out. So I don't have explanations for anybody, but I can tell you that it's not as straightforward a process as you would expect it to be.
It's government. Next question. He didn't really say that, did he? Is there a protocol for schools to notify parents, or is that the responsibility of the contact tracing team through the county?
Notify parents of what, do you think?
I would assume that there is a positive case, and I'm just assuming, because all I do is get to read what's there. They don't tell me anymore in my ear.
Obviously
but I'm assuming that there's a positive case in a
the school.
classroom or in a school.
Yeah, the parents are notified by the school that if their child is a close contact of the child that had COVID, and that's the policy.
Next question. Are there beds somewhere other than Reed that get counted in the capacity for Indiana District 6 on the indiana.gov site?
Yes, and I hope this answer is responsive to that. If you look at the map of District 6, it's Wayne County, Randolph County, Henry County, and then runs actually up kind of northwest for a couple of counties. There isn't really any kind of natural connection between all these counties otherwise, but there are a number of healthcare facilities in each county, and so that's part of the bed counts that goes into that. Reed is far
Not
from
all
the
the
only one.
counties have hospitals, I don't think. Henry County has the Henry County Hospital in Newcastle, and Randolph County has a hospital. I don't know, Jay is in District 6. I don't think they have a hospital.
I'm just not very familiar, so I don't know. I can't tell you exactly what hospitals or how many beds, but you've mentioned a couple, and they have a certain amount of beds that'll make it seem like there are more beds in District 6 than just what are at Reed.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to one more. How many more people can be sick and off the jobs before we shut down again, even for a couple of weeks?
Is there plans for a shutdown? Well, that would be up to the governor of the state to do that. I don't know if he's got certain criteria that he's following in order to trigger having a shutdown. The response of all the states is very uneven. There are places, I saw that the governor of New York had shut down restaurants in New York, and their positivity rate is much less than ours is. But his argument was he did not want there to be a surge of cases. I think the governor is torn between hurting businesses that have already suffered from being shut down earlier in the pandemic, and then not spreading the virus. A lot of these restaurants have made tremendous economic investments in spacing, putting up plastic shields, doing everything they can to safely let somebody, maybe a husband and wife, sit at a table and have a meal without the possibility of catching COVID. But the short answer to that question is I don't know what the answer is to that, because I won't be called upon to make that decision. It'll be Governor Holcomb and his advisors. At some point, you can get so much infection that you almost are forced to stop all gatherings. Hopefully that won't happen, but we've got 2 major holidays in the dead of winter ahead of us. So many people are fearful that it may come to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, you mentioned response is very uneven. It's not just New York is that way, California is that way. I have a child who lives in, one of my kids lives in San Francisco, and San Francisco County is a very densely populated place. A lot of people live there, although it's become a little bit depopulated when a lot of people have left the city. But the governor shut down indoor dining when San Francisco County had just over 100 new cases in a day for the entire county. So yeah, then that's certainly not the approach that's being taken in a lot of the rest of the country. But I think we shouldn't sneer at a concern about overreacting and causing more harm to businesses that have suffered, as you've mentioned, because this isn't really about the business as much as businesses are owned by people. Businesses are run by people. Businesses employ people. When those businesses can't function, then a lot of people have misery that has nothing to do with getting sick with COVID-19. And so it can be very hard for people who work in those industries to understand why they are made to bear the burden of the economic impacts of COVID-19. And you mentioned the restaurant industry, and that is probably the single most affected industry. And I think I saw statistics the other day that a huge proportion of restaurants have had to shut down, including some very famous places. Somebody told me that Michael Simon's restaurants in the Cleveland area are all shutting down permanently, as an example. So, and that affects real people, and it's hard to come back from that. So we shouldn't maybe be too harsh on the governor for being reluctant to do that, but I think everybody realizes that there's a spectrum here, and at a certain point you have to take steps you wish you didn't have to, and that's a difficult thing for the political leadership to wrestle with, and so I don't relish the governor's job.
And so much of this is the behavior of people within these restaurants. I mean, if you're getting up from a table to use the bathroom, put a mask on, avoid other people on the way to the bathroom and coming back. I mean, doing these simple things makes that outing safer, and you can hold the business owner accountable for the behavior of the patrons in many cases. We've got all these signage and masks, but we can't tackle people and wrestle masks onto them. So that's the way it goes.
Okay, but there are no plans, and everybody's used to seeing you all starting with last spring, with the first press conferences that came out where they were doing some shutdowns. They're obviously going to talk to the medical experts before they make that call. You all don't have plans written out right now that says, okay, this is going to trigger the shutdown. Is this a day-to-day type of thing? You look at the numbers, you look at the beds you have left, you look at how tired your staffs are. I think part of the question is, what are your thought processes about what it would take for you all to even suggest to the powers that be that maybe things need to be quelled just a little bit?
From Reed's perspective, I can just tell you, we try not to be too prescriptive to to tell anybody what they should be doing. I think the main thing we can do is just inform and say, here's where we're at, here's where we see this going, and how can we help you make decisions to the local political leaders. We've had conference calls with the mayor and the county commissioners, but I think the reality is the local political leadership is relatively limited in what they can do because they only have certain authorities.
They can't be more severe than the governor.
Exactly.
We can't be more severe than the governor.
And I think that the governor has actually, because
you cannot be more severe than the
cannot
governor.
be.
Okay.
My impression
Wait
is
a
that
minute. We cannot be less severe. We can be more severe than the governor. I should term severe. We could be more restrictive. The governor has limited counties that are orange to a gathering of 50, and we've made it 25. So we were more restricted. We can't be more liberal. If the governor says you can have 50 people, we can't say no. We want to have 60 here in Wayne County. So I misspoke. I apologize.
But I think some things, to the question of, well, does that mean, the county health department can, or even the local political leaders, the county commissioners, the mayor, can they just shut down all businesses in the county and the city? But I think even there, they have some limits to their authority under the law. And probably more importantly, they have some limits in their ability to enforce mandates.
Well, the health department has the power to protect the public welfare by doing that, but we have no enforcement capabilities.
Right.
The frustrating thing about this, Tom, is the fact that this is all driven by human behavior. I mean, we want to keep all these businesses open if people will. I'm sick of saying this, if they'll simply wear a nice fitting mask and socially distance. We can soldier on, the race will come down. But when you do things like closing a business, what you're doing is taking away the place where somebody will gather so that they can't spread the virus. But it's frustrating just having that knowledge and knowing your advice is not being followed.
But you have to think through even if you can do certain things, you have to think through what the consequences of that are.
Exactly.
And all of the consequences, not just, can we stop the spread of COVID-19 by closing down every business in the county? I think that's not as simple a question to answer as you would think, because if people aren't at work, where are they going to be? And it's the same logic that you've applied to the schools. If one of the reasons we want to keep as many kids in school as we can is because if they're not in school, they're gathered someplace else in less controlled circumstances. Yeah. So we have to be really careful and judicious about the things that we do. That's just my opinion as really just another citizen in the community. And from Reed's perspective, we try not to, demand that certain mandates be taken, but simply try to inform and help decision making. But it's tough to be in the position of the health department, the mayor, the commissioners, because they want to see the right thing happen for the community, but it's really hard to figure out what's the best thing to do.
Okay. You're watching Ask the Doctors on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're speaking with Dr. David Jetmore, Wayne County Health Officer, Dr. Thomas Huth, Vice President of Medical Affairs at Reed Health. Every week you bring us the numbers, as we call them, but they are people. So yep. Let's talk about where we are and as you extrapolate that out, where you think those are going, where we're going to end up, even just for this week.
Sure. The Wayne County numbers should be the first graph, and we've all gotten used to looking at this, I think, by now. The last bar on the right is partial week. That's only through Wednesday, which is 4 reporting days, starting with Sunday. There were 392 through Wednesday, and basically you simply do a easy mathematical projection. That means for the week we should end up about 581, which would make this week the biggest week in terms of lab positives that we've had. Now hopefully that won't be the case. I mean, things could have dropped off, could have been far fewer cases in the days since then. I sincerely hope that's the case.
If the number is that high, are you attributing that to what might be the end of the Thanksgiving holiday?
Hopefully that is like, if that's our Thanksgiving bump, hopefully that's it. The problem is that they're, with the time it takes for the different stages of going through a surge to happen is like, first you got to have the cases, then a week or two into it is when people really get sick, and that's when they populate the hospital, and then it takes another week or two before people die from the disease. So there are like these reverberations that happen afterwards. So I hope that 581 number is wrong, but generally when I do these projections, very short-term projections like this, they tend to be right more often than not, unfortunately. I'm not ready to predict the rest of the pandemic. That's way outside my competence, but I can tell you what looks like will happen this week. The next page is something that we've looked at many times, and again, I've reoriented the time frames a little bit, but in the top two age demographics, 70 to 79 and 80 plus, we can see that we're still running about 19% overall are in the older age demographics, and that's a big change from the previous reporting period. And that's very, very concerning because they're much more prone to the severe outcomes, which leads to the next page, which is the projection, the calculation of expected deaths and then the actual deaths so far. And really, it's the last two bars that are important, and those are since October 1st, based on a number of cases that we've had, which is about 3,800, I think was the number, 19% of which are over age 70. We should have around 119 deaths just on those cases so far, and we're up to 99. We were up to 99. When I calculated all this yesterday, it's actually one or two higher than that now. The last page is the read statistics, and I just brought down a shortened time frame over the last 13 weeks. And this is the one little bright spot, is that in this week underway so far, which is the last set of bars, we actually have somewhat fewer total patients in isolation and minimally but tiny amount fewer known positives in the hospital. But we've got a couple more, 2 to 3 more patients on ventilators on average this week compared to last. And again, that's a consequence of, we get these cases, they get sick to be in the hospital, then eventually some of them wind up on ventilators, and that's what we're seeing now.
You're watching Ask the Doctors on WCTV Channel 11. What we're going to do is try to get a couple more questions in, and then maybe kind of look forward into this week a little bit about what you two are actually expecting if this authorization comes about. So let's go with the next question if we can. If Christmas may be an even bigger surge, are there any plans to ask schools to return virtually January 4th? It is much easier to plan in advance for that which seems like it would be reasonable.
Well, once again, the decision on whether or not we close the schools is dependent on how the virus is spreading. If we have a high degree of spreading within the school confines, then I would be the first one to suggest that the schools be shut and the children learn virtually. But we're not seeing that, Eric. We're seeing children that are wearing masks, being socially distanced, taught by a distanced math teacher, and learning in that environment. We're seeing a much higher level of spread from group activities like funerals, weddings, people gathering at bars or restaurants than we are in the schools. And like Tom pointed out earlier, if we send all these children home, where are they going to go? They're going to group together without masks. So at least in school, they're in a controlled environment and they're learning something. So my decision to do that would be based on whether or not there's a lot of spread within the confines of the school.
I actually passed some kids this morning standing, waiting on a bus, and there were 4 or 5 of them all masked up. So even standing there without adult supervision, they were doing what they were asked to do. Next question. How safe is it to eat takeout food?
Well, I hope it's very safe because that's what I've done.
You
instead of
and me
going into
both. I
restaurants.
was going to say. I've done that a few times.
Yeah, I think it's very safe. We first of all, we have to realize restaurants are inspected by the health department regularly, and they all know what they need to be doing to maintain safety of their food products. And I'm personally very comfortable that those same measures are effective in this situation. And gosh, the places that I've gone to grab some takeout, seems like the workers have all been properly, attired and taking the right precautions. So I have no qualms. What do you think, Dave?
I don't have any qualms either. I think when we first started this in the spring, people talked about that, and I think everybody was worried that we were going to pick up a coronavirus from the food packaging, but I think we've learned since then that this is basically a respiratory virus, and 99.99% of the spread is occurring from people with the COVID spreading infected viral particles. And if takeout food went away, I would starve to death at this point. So
we wouldn't want to see that
my
happen.
survival depends on this. So I think it's perfectly safe. I agree with you, Tom.
Let's try to get one more in. Would you talk to people about how masks may or may not affect their immune system?
I am aware of no science that wearing a mask has any effect on anyone's immune system for good or ill, except to the extent that it is protective from, letting in pathogens. I've heard this complaint that people have said, well, I'm not wearing a mask because it makes people sicker, which I am aware of no data to that effect, and I think it's just wishful thinking on some people's parts.
It just doesn't make any sense to me how anybody would arrive at that. I've seen no evidence of it, number one. I've seen no scientific papers that would support that position, but I just can't fathom, just in my knowledge of anatomy and physiology, how such a thing would come to pass. So I would not worry if you're a mask wearer, which I hope you are. I would not worry about wearing a mask.
Okay. We've got about 5 minutes left to go.
Sure.
If we hear from the FDA what is expected, what does this next week look like for you? We've heard that you talked about your refrigerator being in place. Is there vaccine that has been released to you? When would it be released to you? If say Monday morning, you got information, okay, the approval's out, what does the next week look like? And will you both come in here Friday already vaccinated?
Hopefully that will be the
I
case.
hope that comes to pass.
We have not received vaccine yet. The state has outlined a tentative timeline for how that will happen, and basically it's not going to be released from the federal reserves and wherever they're reserving them. Probably at the manufacturers, won't be released for distribution until the FDA provides its ruling, and then all these logistical mechanisms are going to come in to rapidly disseminate vaccine. It will go directly to hospitals. It's not going to make any stops anywhere at the state level. And in the state of Indiana, it will actually first go to 5 particular large hospital systems in the state who will, as soon as the state releases them, they will actually begin vaccinating their teams of healthcare workers basically as a test or a run to see how this works, and then to provide information to the rest of us about how it's working. But that could happen on Tuesday, Wednesday, assuming the state, after its own review of the FDA's data, decides to release it. We expect to maybe receive the vaccine on Thursday and begin vaccination operations on Friday is our current timeline, assuming all the approvals happen on time.
Okay. What do we need to know as residents, real quickly? We've got about 3 minutes left. One, we've had questions about another mask giveaway. I keep hearing that something may happen next weekend. Are you hearing anything?
I haven't heard anything.
Okay.
Christine hasn't said anything
I think
about
there
it.
is. I've heard that too, but I don't remember the date that I was told.
I've heard the 18th, I've heard the 19th. The 18th is a Friday, the 19th is a Saturday.
feeling it is
Saturday would
next
seem to make a
weekend.
little
I
bit
think
more
Yeah,
sense to
it's
me.
either right before or on next weekend. I wish I knew more, but I don't.
Okay, we'll put out some information if we get something definite that
Sherry
there will be
Harlan,
a
if you're
mask
out
giveaway.
there,
Huh?
if Sherry Harlan, write something on Facebook.
There you
So
go.
Ryan will see it.
If you know something, let us know. Advice as we head out, you each get about 30 seconds. Where we're going.
Well, as I said earlier, 2 major holidays, the dead of winter. We're tired of this. We want to be around our friends, but hang on, people. Wear your mask, socially distance. The tunnel's longer than I like, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, the vaccine's going to help, but it's not going to make a huge difference in the short run. So we all need to continue doing the things that we're doing to the best of our ability, and to get some inspiration. Think of it as protecting other people. So let's protect the vulnerable by protecting ourselves.
Okay. Dr. David Jetmore, Wayne County Health Officer, thanks again for being here. Dr. Thomas Huth, Vice President, Medical Affairs, Read Health, TV guru, just internet sensation.
I'm just a country doctor blundered into the spotlight for a minute. You all will forget me pretty soon.
Probably
Which
not.
is as it should be.
But you're everywhere, and thank you for making sure that we have the information. You are Wednesday
pleasure.
evenings, 5 p.m.
Yes.
WHIO
Correct.
TV. Also, if you're on LinkedIn, you can follow him. He
LinkedIn,
continues to
Facebook,
provide
Twitter.
some information there also.
You name it, I'm there.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. I will see you next Friday at 2 o'clock. The Chamber is having an event, couch shopping. This one should be interesting. That's happening actually this evening on Facebook, so check that out. It's a way to get some shopping done during the holiday season. The Winter Farmers Market continues every Saturday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Star Jeanette Historic Site, 201 South 1st Street. Also, the Festival of Lights, if you're looking to get into the holiday spirit, definitely check it out. Every Friday and Saturday night in December until Christmas, 6 to 9 p.m., a drive-through in Crites Park over in Cambridge City. Go, enjoy the lights, enjoy the holiday season. Definitely do stay safe. We will be back with you next Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. here on Ask the Doctors on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. Thank you for watching. Please wear your mask. Dr. Huth mentioned the parade last night. If you really want to honor the healthcare workers, put a mask on. Thanks for watching. As always, I wish you well. Have a great weekend.